Hey, welcome to something a little bit different. Tier lists on YouTube are popular, so I made my own, specifically on Lethal Company, because I feel that with 200 hours in this game, I can say what is good or not. We're gonna start with D tier, or dumb creatures, I like to call them. And we're gonna start with the obvious ones, okay? Manticoils and Roaming locusts. I don't even think I need to say anything. Roaming locusts just exist, and then they fly away, and it's like, ooh, and that's kind of it. And then you have Manticoil, which fly around and kind of did the exact same thing. They're just ambient creatures, so they don't really do anything. Landmines, I put in D tier because they are very obvious. The only way I can see you dying to a landmine is if you somehow are walking backwards into it and just don't hear it. Because, I mean, let's say you have a Coil Head on you and you're backing away, and it's possible to run into a landmine, but you also can hear it. So, like, I don't know, that's definitely a D tier, and that's a pretty dumb move. Loot bugs. Everyone loves loot bugs. These little critters are absolutely adorable, but they are super easy to avoid. They honestly don't really mess with you unless you take their loot specifically, or loot that they were going after. And if they are going after you, you can actually drop loot for them, and there's a small chance that they just grab that over you. If they are chasing you, you just kind of run, honestly, not that far, not even out of sight, and they will just leave you alone. Now, if they are aggroed on you, and you happen to have a shovel or something, and for some reason you can't outrun them, even though they're extremely easy to outrun, maybe you get stuck in a bunch of corners and you're just panicking like crazy, they also don't do that much damage. And if you do have that shovel or a stop sign or something, you just smack them 3 times and that's it. And they're really easy to kill. So, D tier, as much as I love them. Spore Lizards, I do not have to say much. Spore Lizards actively run away from you, and instead of attacking you, they will just spray you with a toxin type thing, and that's kind of it. So yeah, no, it's super easy. They're also really easy to kill, and they don't do that much damage even if they do hit you. So yeah, no, definitely D tier. It might be a slightly controversial one, but I don't think it is. Centipedes. They hang above you, kind of like a head crab, and will drop on you if you go underneath them. Now, in my early days, they were one of the worst enemies, and I've died to them all the time. Recently, though, kind of the opposite. They are extremely easy to avoid. They drop down, not when you're directly underneath them, like a smart creature would do, but rather just in a circle or like a small radius around them. So usually they drop and just fucking miss. Not to mention, they die in 2 hits. They die if you leave the facility. Even if they grab onto you, if you have a shovel or something on you, you can look down, pick it up, and smack them off of yourself. So not only can you save yourself, but also a teammate or a friend can. In solos, they actually won't kill you. It's impossible for them to kill you unless they drop on you a second time. So that first time, they'll just stay on you and eventually leave, and then the second time, they'll try killing you. So yeah, no, they're definitely D class. They're one of the easiest hostile enemies to avoid. Alright, let's start with C tier for seriously, as in you seriously just died to that. Starting off with the Ghost Scroll. Now, you may see this and go, what? But the Ghost Scroll is really hard, you know. It's basically game over for that person because she appears for one person only. No. She is one of the easiest enemies to avoid because she is very consistent. She always appears behind you, every time. If she is there, she gives a very, very loud audio cue. Whether it be breathing, a crackling, like smacking effect, or whatever the hell, whatever it may be, it's very obvious. You will know that she is there. And when she is, the only thing you have to do is just not look at her. But she's consistent. She always spawns directly behind the player. The only time where it could be a problem is if she appears and you're already at a dead end or something. In that case, you just wait. Legitimately, you can just wait. The other thing is, even if you do look at her, first off, she gives you 2 chances right at the beginning. After those 2 chances of either disappearing or you looking at her, she gets aggroed. When she's aggroed, she is very easy to outrun if you don't weigh that much. Not to mention, even when you outrun her, if you leave the facility or enter the facility while she's chasing you, she disappears immediately. That's number one. Number two, she just disappears after about 5 to 10 seconds of chasing you. That's it. She's extremely easy to avoid almost entirely. About 95% of the time that I have Ghost Scroll with any of my friends or anything, especially in solo, I just deal with her. She's not that bad. Now, she can be bad if you're comboed with other characters, but usually it's still very manageable. For instance, Bracken or Coil Heads or anything like that, you're always looking in one direction anyway, so yeah. That is all to say that even when she's behind you, and even when she's being a pain in the behind and all that, literally, she cannot appear if your back is against the wall. I don't know, there's so many ways to avoid her. She's legitimately one of the easiest entities. I really want to hammer that point. Moving on to bunker spiders. Now, bunker spiders are kind of a weird one because their AI is relatively complex, but overall, my opinions on them are kind of similar to the Ghost Squirrel or the Snare Flea or Centipede. They're just slow. You can, again, very easily outrun them even with about 30 pounds of weight on you. And once you lose sight with them, they tend to kind of just feck off. They don't tend to continue their chase. As you can see in the clip in front of you, after a certain distance, they just give up. They don't keep chasing you. They're way too slow. Their main gimmick is obviously running into webs, which you can use that actually to move the spider to places you want it to be or to help your teammate, which is what I do here. I smack the shovel and you see it instantly. It knows where I am and where to go. So I don't know. They're super counterable. They're kind of hard to kill and they do pretty high damage, but especially after they've placed all of their webs, they will just camp a spot. Once they're in that spot, they will not move until you either touch the webs or get too close. So, especially at that stage, they're one of the easiest things to avoid. But until that stage, they can be a little annoying, and that's why they're a bit above the Ghost Girl. Next up is Bracken, or Flowerman. Now, they're probably the most infamous entity in this game, but they have a extremely similar story to the Ghost Girl, except whereas with the Ghost Girl you don't want to look at her, Bracken you do. So how do they really work? Well, I mean, once you've seen them, or they're sneaking around a corner, or your friend says you have seen them, you just kind of turn around every now and then. Kind of the opposite of the Ghost Girl, where you just don't turn around, you just turn around every now and then when you see them, you look away. They're super easy to misjudge. For instance, if we're going off of scariest, I'll put Bracken up there, but in terms of just gameplay mechanics, he hasn't really killed me that much. I would say he's only killed me, honestly, 6-7 times out of my entire 200 hours. And in those circumstances, yeah, I would say he's a little harder than the spider or the Ghost Girl, and can definitely kill you a lot more often, but otherwise he's very manageable. Now, next up is the Blob. I love the Blob, or the Hydro Deer. Now, the Hydro Deer isn't exactly harder than Bracken. It's actually very manageable. It's super slow, unless you have a boombox. You could jump over it in most scenarios, and unless you're in a pinch or there's an entity, also avoidable. So short, simple. It's not really above Bracken. It's not really above anyone. It's just it can trap you, and especially when you have other entities like a Coil Head or something, they can kill you. I've died to a Hydro Deer way more, but that's pretty much it. Alright, next up are bees. Now, I don't think I have any footage for them, but if you played the game, you know what they are. They have little beehives. They buzz around it. If you get too close, they start chasing you. Now, there's already countless videos on this, and some people didn't know this, but it was something like me and my friends figured out right away. They're very easy, honestly. They're not at the start. At the very beginning of the game, you may struggle with them. You may struggle with them quite a lot, because when they're detached from their beehive from a certain distance, so they have to be a certain distance away from their beehive, they just start roaming the map. And they'll just roam the map until they see you, and they'll chase you until they kill you, basically. They're very hard to outrun at that stage. However, if they're near or close enough to their beehive, so if you drop it for instance, because the beehive does count as money. If you drop it and they're chasing you, they latch back onto the beehive and then they don't move. They stay on their beehive. So once we figured that out, they became extremely easy. They can still be a little challenging if a friend is too close or something and the bees choose them over you. If you run too fast, which I've had only happen a few times, or if you're too heavy, that sort of thing. They have killed me enough, but yeah, they're a C. Next up is turrets. The reason turrets are so high is because it depends on what moon you're on, but like if you go to Titan or especially Dine, you get a absolute metric fuck ton of turrets and landmines. Like I said, landmines though, they're very easily avoidable. Turrets, not so much. However, turrets would be higher if it wasn't for the fact that I recently learned that you can do one of 4 different things. Obviously you can just run away from their line of sight, and that works. Closing a door, that sort of thing also works, but you can also get on top of them if applicable and they will stop targeting you, or get behind where their radius of targeting is. They'll just immediately stop. Even if they're literally shooting at you, they will stop. So that's why they're in C. Alright, next is B tier, or barely a threat. Now we're going to start it off with a forest giant. Forest giant used to be A. They were honestly very fucking annoying, which is what A tier is, by the way. But in patch or update 45, I believe it was, they nerfed them. And they nerfed them pretty bad. They're a lot slower. Like a lot slower. And because they're a lot slower, they're way easier to avoid. You can completely outrun a forest giant as long as you have nothing on you. So it's now just become a trend for when someone's getting chased by a forest giant, we all just go drop your stuff, and then you just run, and you can completely outrun them for quite a while. And given your stamina, assuming you have enough, you can make enough distance to regain some stamina and then run. They'll eventually catch you, but usually you can find a place to hide or something of the sorts, or get back in the facility or whatever it may be. So for that, there would be. Next up, Coil Head. Now, Coil Head is probably one of the more egregious entities. They really stun lock you. They would be higher if it weren't for the fact that their AI isn't great, and they oftentimes are very slow. So you can kind of like run forward, do a little spin, run forward, do a little spin, run forward, do a little spin. And it makes it more manageable. I would say they're probably higher up on the B list. I would say they're probably pretty close to A. But I still think they're B with just how well or how good I've gotten at dodging and avoiding them. They're not that bad. Now, another big reason for them being so low is because you can actually use them to glitch out of the map, as well as just completely avoid dealing with them under certain circumstances, certain railings, certain walls, certain whatever. They just break. So they're lower, but those are glitches. So if those glitches get fixed, they'll probably go higher. That's it. Baboon Hawks are next. You may be a little surprised, like, oh, why are Baboon Hawks? Why are Baboon Hawks so high in this list? You know, why are they not a C or a D? That's because if you have something they want, or if they're in a pack, which they often are, they can be really, really annoying. They can completely stop you from going in a direction. Now, their AI seems a little buggy, but when it's not buggy, my goodness, do they just gun it for you, and they just peck and nearly kill you. Now, I want to be clear. For the most part, they're so high up, not because of how difficult they are as an entity. Like, for instance, I would say a Coil Head is much harder to avoid than these guys. My problem is, once they're attracted to you, they don't let up in a very aggravating way. They're faster than you if they decide to be. They can completely just bully you into your ship if they want to. They can camp you really hard. Like, the forest giant does the same thing, but the difference between this and the forest giant is the forest giant tends to go around and tends to lose attraction eventually. These guys just hop around your ship. They also will steal your loot, and again, it's just another thing that really adds to it. So they're just annoying. That's what puts them so high. They're not so much like difficult to deal with. They're really annoying when they want to be. So yeah, that's about it. Next we have dogs. Now dogs I didn't really know where to put them, because on one hand they're very easy to dodge. If you constantly strafe, like if you hold A or D just whenever they're about to charge at you, I would give it about 95 to 99% chance that they just miss. If you strafe, they almost always miss, which is great because it means they're kind of avoidable. But you have to be quiet, and especially with friends, they can get pretty overwhelming. If anyone has ever had a dog go in the ship, you know it is just, you leave. You can't do anything about it. They also basically render Titan or those later moons where you're trying to bring back all of this stuff useless, because as soon as you trigger one, they don't really go away. They kind of do, but they also kind of can't. If you actually make noise or attract them in a wrong way, they tend to break as well. So they can be very annoying, and they can be one of the hardest entities, but again, at the same time, they're very easy to dodge, so they can also be one of the easiest entities. It just depends on the moon, it depends on their spawn, and it really depends on their aggro. So yeah, they are definitely B, and I didn't know if I should put them higher, but I feel like it's just a good spot for them right now. Now next up are worms. Worms are very much like dogs. If you manage to catch their audio cue and you have a good enough reaction time to get ready to deal with them, and you know exactly how to deal with them, they can be pretty easily dodged or just avoided entirely because of just how their AI works. It's kind of complicated, but basically you have to be in the circle a certain amount of time before it goes up. However, they're also very quirky, like the dogs, making them very easy to die to if you weigh like any amount of weight whatsoever, and if you're not readily prepared to deal with them. So it's pretty basic, but for that they belong in B. Now next up is the Nutcracker in A tier. A for annoying. That's right, we're moving up. Now, there's only 2 entities in this one, so I'll keep it kind of brief. But Nutcracker. The Nutcracker is one of the most odd entities because its main mechanic is that it can't see you unless you move, but only when its eye is actively searching for you. So when it's just running around and marching, it's not actually a threat, except it fucking is. If it happens to run into you, which by the way is extremely easy because of its weird ass AI, it just kills you. It is an instant kill. If it touches you, it is an instant kill. It is aggravating as hell. Plus, when it starts looking around, you can no longer move, including your camera and dancing. You can't do anything. You literally have to hold completely still, which I don't have a problem with. It's just when it comes to the fact that it's inside the facility and you have other things to deal with, it makes it nearly impossible to deal with the Nutcracker when everything else kind of hinders that. They're also really hard to kill. They're not that easy, and they're very powerful. If they shoot you with that shotgun at a pretty lengthy distance, it does a lot of damage or just outright kills you. They're strong, they're very powerful, and they're more of just like, oh, there's a Nutcracker, and your goal is to try to kill it for 6 quotas because you just can't fucking do it, even with teammates and doing things. Now you can kind of cheese it here and there, which is why I wouldn't say it's S, but yeah, it is rough. Now last up in the A tier is the Jester. Now the Jester is probably my favorite entity wise, just because of how he looks. But that's besides the point. This guy, when you see him, there's a rare chance that he doesn't see you, but if he does, he'll start following that player. Sometimes he'll switch, doesn't really matter. When he starts following you, that's when the countdown has already begun. You have about 45, I think, seconds before he starts winding. Once he starts winding, then you have another like 40-ish seconds before he pops. Once he pops, he kills everything in the facility. Player-wise, he kills all the players in the facility. He knows exactly where you are, unless you're out of bounds or on very specific railings where his AI for some reason can't find you, like on top of a bookshelf. And because of that, it makes him slightly cheesable. But the reality of the situation is, if one person is inside that facility, when he pops, they're as good as dead. And they kind of hinder you and the rest of your team from going back in, because he will just target the nearest player. He is endgame. If he's starting the wind, you have to leave. You don't really get a choice. There's no way to do anything about it. And that's kind of why he's very close to S, to be honest. But the thing is, he's not that hard to counter, because all you have to do is leave. And because all you have to do is leave, it's not exactly challenging. The challenging part just comes from trying to get loot to and from the entrance or the exit before he pops. So he more just makes it more challenging to meet your quotas, not so much challenging to actually avoid him as an entity. Regardless, I would still say he's fucking annoying. Now this last tier is S+, screw you plus. I couldn't come up with anything clever. Now, if you're really astute, you already know who the last two are. And we're going to kick that off with the Mimic. The Mimic is the newest entity, minus the Nutcracker, and is by far the most annoying entity in the game. I kind of feel like it was rushed a tad bit, just because not only is it buggy, but it's just not fun to play against. The Mimic is cool when you have big lobbies or when you're by yourself. Anywhere in between, like 4 players, 3 players, 2 players, even like 5 players, the Mimic is just annoying. That is all it is. Because the thing is, the Mimic can just spawn, okay? And it acts like a player, but with the mask. Cool. It's not really that big of a deal, but the problem is that when it kills one of your teammates, it turns them into another mask. What's the problem, you ask? Well, you see, there can also be up to 2 other mimics that naturally spawn, as far as I'm aware. I've had 3 mimics naturally spawn, and then my teammates died, and then there were 6 of them, so not to mention that the masks that spawn on the ground as floor loot, you can actually put on to become a mimic, which introduces bad manners, man. Your teammates can just BM the shit out of your lobby. They can put on the masks in the ship when no one knows what's going on, and then all of a sudden you've got to deal with mimics. The amount of times that I've jumped down to the ship and in midair was caught by a mimic because I landed on top of them or around them is insane. Here's the thing, they're not that hard to kill, right? And that's the upside. So why are they S? Well, you see, they're very quick and their reach is about the same as yours with the shovel. So unless you're like an expert, right? And you don't mess up somehow and just get caught and make it even worse for everyone else in the whole lobby, what I've noticed is you can actually get grabbed as you hit it or as you kill it, and then your camera is permanently stuck because for whatever reason it wasn't made to check that wouldn't occur. So it's one of the big bugs that really plague it right now. It is the most annoying entity, especially because it can go outside and inside. In your ship, out of your ship. It can walk up ladders, and by walk up I mean it just teleports, which by the way is another really annoying thing. Sometimes it walks up it, sometimes it teleports up it. I've had friends who die the millisecond they enter a facility because a mimic just happened to be there, because it just happened to be leaving the facility. They left, they got caught. It's really annoying. It's a really, really annoying entity. It's quickly become one of my least favorites. Alright, and now we're finally at the last entity. If you've been astute and you already know what's coming up, good job. But for those who don't know, the final entity that I think is by far the worst in the game is the Thumper. I do not know
what kind of coding shenanigans goes on with this guy behind the scenes. But as soon as a Thumper spawns, if you have no shovel or sign, it's basically, well, guess we can't enter anymore. The Thumper is essentially impossible to outrun unless you have a lot of corners to turn. It is nearly impossible to lose line of sight and make it stop chasing for one of two reasons. One, it seems to be able to detect you from very far away, and two, because of the previously mentioned thing. 3, once it spots someone, it is at full speed, which by the way is ridiculously quick, for the rest of the match. Sometimes it's not, most of the time it is. And it's even more annoying because then it just keeps speeding up. Another thing is, if it was you who it was chasing, sucks to be you, because oftentimes it is perma aggro to chase you. I don't know why. The instant it sees you, it speeds up all the way instead of where it normally goes. It goes, rah, I saw you, and then it kind of slows down. But on top of that, it's also very inconsistent. So that sounds OP and it's really fucking annoying to deal with. But if you have a shovel and you miss, right, you're dead. I very, very rarely live after missing my first shovel hit. If you do hit the first shovel hit, it slows him down greatly, and you have to immediately go in for the next 3 swings or so. If not, he kind of just kills you. He speeds right back up, and then you're kind of just cooked unless you can get a second hit off without it getting a second off. That's the other thing. It 2-shots. Why does it 2-shot? It makes no sense. It could take you up to 5 hits to kill it, but it 2-shots you. It's insane. The thing is, it's getting a major nerf in update 47 or update 50 or whatever the next update is. So when that happens, chances are it will go down. But right now, it is the buggiest and just most aggravating one I think I can think of. Because unlike with every single other entity, when we hear, oh, there's a Thumper, all of a sudden me and most of my friends just don't even bother. We'll try to go in and kill it with like a shovel or something, but often one of us ends up dying. Almost every single time. I've had a Thumper completely wipe us all out because we all try to kill it because it was that fast. And it can be really buggy. It can go so gosh darn quick around corners sometimes, and at other times it's super slow like it's supposed to be. Sometimes it'll smack into a wall and slow down like it's supposed to. Other times it just smacks it and then just glides against the wall and hits you. Sometimes it's extremely slow for some reason, but it's still permanent aggroed on you. There's just so many problems. Until all that's fixed, Thumper is my least favorite entity. Here's the full tier list if you wanted to see the whole thing. I'm sure it's got some flaws. I should have organized it a bit better, but it is what it is. Thanks for watching. Good night.